Hey everybody, welcome back. It's been a while since I've made a video, but I've been busy painting the fuselage on my Zenith Cruiser. As you can see, it's no longer behind me. It is behind that curtain in the paint booth. So while I paint that, and that paint is drying, that gives me some time to work on the KITFOX. I've been working on reinstalling the flight controls that I disassembled from the airplane in order to paint the airframe black. All of those controls now are ready to reinstall, so let's get started. Well, the very first thing I did was put this bolt through this torque tube arm here, and you'll notice when I put it in I didn't grease the bolt before I assembled it. What I don't show you on here is that after I torqued the nut on here, I actually took it back apart and put a little bit of grease on that bolt. So right here though, you can see how it goes together. The bolt goes through the torque tube, you put a washer and a nut on, and after I did that I used a 3/8 socket and open end wrench just to tighten the nut almost all the way. And you'll see in your instruction manual it gives you a torque to use for the nut. So I set my torque wrench and torqued the nut to the proper torque. And when you're done here, you'll see that it rotates nice and smoothly. When you're done, it's time to install it into the fuselage. So there's a nylon block here on the left side of it with 2 bolts that go down, and then there will be 4 bolts on the black bracket that's on the right side of the airplane. These are the 2 bolts in the nylon, and I've also found it helpful. I actually did it after I put this in, but again I took this back apart and I put a little bit of grease around the tube in this nylon block, and it makes it a lot smoother. So it's real nice and smooth now once you get all the bolts tightened down. You're also going to notice in the manual that it gives you a torque for these 2 nuts, and I found that you cannot torque these to the torque that they specify, because if you do, you'll lock it down on this torque tube and you won't even be able to move the torque tube. So I just put the nuts on as tight as I could with still having free movement. I found that if you take your time with this, make sure everything's lubed, and be careful with how you tighten the nuts, you'll have a real nice smooth flight controls. Next I installed these bell cranks and put a cotter pin in here. Sorry my hand is in the way, but all I'm doing is bending the cotter pin around the bolt, and that prevents the nut from ever falling off. So the next step is to connect this linkage up. This bolt here, you can see it has a letter E. So if I come down here, that's an AN3 7A bolt. Now one of the things I did when I disassembled the KITFOX was I just put all the hardware into this little container. So when I reach in here and want to pull out a bolt, and when I want to know what it is, I have this nice little aluminum piece here, which is pretty nice. And what you do is you put in your bolt right here. This is for an AN3, 4, 5, 6, so you can put different diameter bolts in there. And you can just see it has a scale on here. So I can put a bolt in here, and right where it ends up on that line, I can see that it's a 7. If I want to just randomly pick another bolt, I can put it in here. That one's also a 7. Here's one here. That's a 13. So it's a real nice thing to have if you want to check the sizes of your bolts. So I'm just going to insert this linkage in here. I'm going to put the bolt in. And I have a washer and a nut. I'm going to put it on the bottom, but I'm not going to tighten it now because, as you can imagine, much later in the build when I'm rigging the flight controls, this ball end here is probably going to need to be turned and adjusted. So I'll just put the nut on there now to keep the bolt from coming out, but I'll tighten it later. And you can see, yeah, that's real nice and loose, just how I want it. And there's nothing special about the next steps. I'm just putting in each of the push rods. And again, when I put in these nuts and bolts, I'm not torquing down the nuts. I'm just putting them on finger tight because all of these rod ends or ball links on the end of these push rods at some point are probably going to need to be rotated and moved. So there's no point in final tightening the nuts just yet. The next step in the process is reassembling this flapper-on mixer. And there's nothing difficult about it. Just follow the manual and see how it goes together. It's just a little odd to work with because these arms that come out make it want to fall in different directions. Here it is installed in the airplane. And again, none of the nuts on all these ball links are tight yet, just because they're probably going to need adjusted at one point. As you can see, everything operates smoothly, just like it should. So now it's time to install the floorboards. But before I install the floorboards, you might think this is a little crazy. I wanted to shine up the screws that secure the floorboards. So I just use a little bit of flitz on a paper towel. I take the screw in my fingers and just rub it on the flitz. It only takes a couple seconds and you'll see the paper towel turns black. Then you wipe it off with a nice clean one. And you'll see here, I know it's a little blurry, but you'll see the difference between the two screws. See how the one on the left is nice and shiny and the other one's kind of dull? I like them all shiny. But once you get your screws nice and shiny, it's just a matter of putting the floorboards back in. If you remember, I bought this kit already partially assembled, so the floorboards are already finished, the holes are drilled, they've been installed previously, so it was really just a matter of putting them back in the proper position and putting my nice shiny screws back in. So now all of the flight controls are reinstalled, except you will notice the rudder pedals are not installed yet. And the reason the rudder pedals are not installed yet is because I ordered the adjustable rudder pedal kit from KITFOX, and laid out here is everything that comes in the kit, with the exception of these two rod ends here. If you remember on one of the other videos I made, two of these were sort of corroded when I bought the kit, so I bought two more to replace those. But everything else here is from the adjustable rudder pedal kit. So everything is done now with reinstalling the controls. The adjustable rudder pedal kit requires a little bit of work to install because you have to take some of the steel parts that come with the original rudder pedals and cut and trim those down. And I'm not real great with working with steel. I can do anything with aluminum, but I need to kind of figure out how I'm going to cut down these steel parts and you know, finish the edges and make them smooth and make them look good. Once I do that, I can have all the rudder pedals sandblasted and powder coated black, and I'll be ready to reinstall all the rudder pedals and the rudder cables back into the airplane. That's going to be the subject of the next video, so make sure you subscribe, follow along on this KITFOX build. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you on the next video.